Well, we are over $20 trillion in debt. We have shocking disregard for the Fourth Amendment rights, a lack of transparency on the part of officials who violate our trust, and political opponents circling the wagons to protect the status quo. Now, my first guest fights the good fight against all of that. And even though I don't always see eye to eye with Senator Rand Paul, I'm glad he's in the Senate, and I'm glad he sticks to his convictions. It's why I've been part of several fundraising and even campaign events for him. Earlier today, I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Rand Paul. Let's watch. Senator, there is really an affront to the Fourth Amendment that if the most powerful government agencies, the Department of Justice, the FBI, if people in the IRS can use their government power to spy on citizens, to punish people for their political views, that's serious. Why is this a big deal, and why aren't more people outraged over it?
You know, the interesting thing about it, Mike, is it's not new either. FDR had an enemies list. He used the IRS to go after Andrew Mellon and others. He actually named them. I think he had about 77 people on his enemies list. The difference between FDR's time and our time is that now, you know, they by hand would have to go stick a magnet on your phone to listen to your conversations. Now it's all gathered up by the millions. There was a story that said that our NSA has the ability to collect every phone call between Italy and the United States, not just the metadata, who you called and how long, but also the conversations. And so this is a real problem. And I think the recent bias that we've seen, you know, Peter Strzok and his girlfriend, Lisa Page over at the FBI, and Bruce Orr at the Department of Justice, now that we've seen these people that are supposed to be objective, fair, impartial police officers, now that we've seen that they have such horrible political anger and bias, we all begin to wonder, what kind of databases are they allowed to search? So last week I sent a letter to the FBI director and I asked him, can Peter Strzok and Lisa Page still search the database for Americans' information? And this is a real question. That's why what I've been fighting for is the traditions of the Fourth Amendment, where the police are allowed to look at your information if they go ask a judge first for permission. And this is the check and balance that keeps the police, most of whom are good, but it keeps us from having a bigoted policeman or a biased policeman or somebody who gets somehow politics on the brain and wants to punish their opponents. It keeps them in check if they have to ask a judge for a warrant.
Do we have to trade off national security in order to protect ourselves against a big government coming after us because they just don't like our views?
I think you won't meet anybody who's more for law and order. I want the police to protect me. I want people not to be allowed to commit violence. You know, I was there during the shooting when we were shot at on the ball field. I was glad the policemen were there to defend us. And so I'm very much a supporter of police and law and order. But the interesting thing is most police are very much a supporter of the Constitution. If you have a policeman on your show from Arkansas or wherever, and you ask them, if you go to a house and it's quiet and the lights are out, but you suspect that there might be a murderer inside, a terrible person or a rapist, do you break the door down, or do you stand on the curb or in your car and call a judge on the phone and get a warrant? And every policeman in America will tell you they obey the Fourth Amendment every time because they want that murderer policeman not to get off on a technicality. They call the judge, and they almost always get the warrant. This was something our founding fathers thought so precious that John Adams said that this search for individualized warrants was the spark that led to the revolution.
What about FISA warrants? Because they're different than the warrants that a local police officer has to go to. I know that you have had some real concerns and reservations about the reauthorization of the whole idea of FISA courts and the lack of accountability and the fact that they're most of the time rubber stamps. It's like 99 9/10% of the time, FISA warrants are instantly granted.
Well, the interesting thing is that FISA stands for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It is intended to empower our intelligence agencies to spy on foreigners in foreign lands. And I'm for that. We do have people that want to attack us. We need to know their motives. We need to know if they're planning. And I'm for that. The other interesting thing is that foreigners really don't get the protection of our Constitution. So I'm not saying you have to call a judge to spy on bin Laden in his camp in Afghanistan. You can just do that without a judge's permission. However, since we spy on most of the world's also talking to Americans. So the president, I remember this from one year, President Obama talked to foreign leaders 1,500 times in 1 year. All of his conversations were recorded. So then you have to trust the FBI not to release that to the media or not to blackmail somebody, or like in General Flynn's case, not to have the FBI call him back in and try to trip him up and get him to say something that contradicted something he said in a private phone call that was secretly recorded. So we have to be very careful about Americans caught up in this database. What we ask for, the reformers, myself and Ron Wyden on the Senate side, Justin Amash and Zoe Lofgren, Republican-Democrat coalitions on both sides, what we ask for is simply this. You can still spy on foreigners in foreign lands without a warrant. You gather as much as you think you see fit. But when they talk to Americans, and let's say they say, well, Mike Huckabee, I heard he was a conservative Republican, and we heard he gave money to Donald Trump, we're going to type your name in and search all of your conversations and all your business transactions every which way to Sunday and see if we can get you on something. That shouldn't happen. And the way you protect that is you find out if someone like Peter Strzok, who hates President Trump, and we know this, and he's talking at work about bringing the president down and preventing him from being president, that person has no business in law enforcement, first of all, but he has no business having the privileges to actually search for Mike Huckabee's name or Rand Paul's name or any other supporter of the president. So this is a big deal, and I've spoken to the president about it. I think he's horrified by the power they have, and we really hope the president will at some point weigh back in on this and support our call, because we still want them to be required to get a warrant before they search a database.
I think every American ought to be worried about this. You don't have to be the president, you don't have to be in politics, but you don't want Big Brother truly stomping all over your constitutional rights. We want to protect law enforcement, but not at the expense of the Constitution. I want to quickly move in the few moments we have. Big budget fight going on, budget deal is before you. It would add to the deficit, but it would at least give the military a release from sequestration. Pragmatically, what do you do? Do you vote for it? Do you vote against it? How are you looking at it?
The deficit makes your country weaker. So if you say we're going to run $1 trillion deficit, but we're going to put all the money we borrow into the military, I think the net result is there comes a time when the country succumbs to debt, and like the Roman Empire crumbles from within because they're overextended and have so much debt, that really we might be shooting ourselves in the foot to say, oh, but it's going towards the military. The other thing to remember is we have doubled, more than doubled, the military budget since 9/11/2001. So we've put a lot of money into the military. And people say they never have enough. Could be true, but you could also say maybe we're in too many places. So there are a lot of wars we're involved with that if we weren't involved with, you know, I'd give every soldier a pay raise, frankly. In fact, we're working on a bill to give every soldier a pay raise with the savings from coming home from Afghanistan.
Well, Senator, I could talk to you all day, but I know you have other things to do. We've got to wrap it up to let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to visit with you. I always admire and appreciate that you have convictions and you stick to them, whether people like it or not, and I admire you for that. Well, my thanks to Senator Rand Paul. You know, the people really need a watchdog, not a lapdog in Washington right now, and he's a good man for the job.